The Holy Gospel according to Matthew. Glory to you, O Lord. Jesus said to the disciples, "About that day or hour, no one knows, neither the angels of heaven nor the Son, but only the Father. For as the days of Noah were, so will be the coming of the Son of Man. For as in those days before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, until the day Noah entered the ark, and they knew nothing until the flood came and swept them all away. So too will be the coming of the Son of Man. Then two will be in the field, and one will be taken and one will be left. Two women will be grinding meal together, one will be taken and one will be left. Keep awake, therefore, for you do not know on what day your Lord is coming. But understand this, if the owner of the house had known in what part of the night the thief was coming, he would have stayed awake and would not have let his house be broken into. Therefore you must also be ready, for the Son of Man is coming at an unexpected hour." The Gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, O Christ. The way I see it, there are two types of people. First, there's the type of person who at the stroke of midnight on November 1st instantly changes out all of the carved pumpkins for a brightly lit and spectacularly trimmed Christmas tree, usually while belting out the holiday tunes blaring from the 24/7 radio Christmas station. Before long, their house usually looks like something out of a Hallmark movie, and you'd hardly know that just hours before there had been trick-or-treaters at their door. Then there's the type of person who insists on waiting. Turkey first and then Santa, they say. November purists, as those of us in the first camp might call them. Well, my tree didn't make it up until this past weekend. It's not for lack of desire. My apartment has long been filled with the aroma of balsam fir candles, and my car radio has been set to 93.9 ever since they made the holiday music switch. And I have admittedly already indulged in my share of holiday-themed Starbucks beverages. But whichever of these camps you identify with, or maybe somewhere in between, I suspect we can all agree on one thing. Advent is jarring. Wake up, our texts scream at us. Now is the moment for you to wake from sleep, Paul writes. Salvation is near. Isaiah prophesies about God's impending judgment on a people who had strayed from God's teachings, and about a future day when war and violence would be no more. More emphatically, and maybe even with a tinge of dread, Jesus calls us to keep awake, because no one knows the day or hour of the coming of the Son of Man. Even our prayer of the day calls on Christ to stir up his power. This is a season of waking up, of being called to attention, of making ready for the coming of Emmanuel, God with us. Advent is like a wake-up call. Stir up your power, Lord Christ, and come. Keep awake, be ready. A time for beating swords into plowshares, for studying peace and unlearning war. No wonder Advent comes as such a jolt. Nothing about our culture, perhaps especially this time of year, seems to make space for Advent. Holly jolly Christmas music has already been on the radio for weeks, and bright red and green and silver and gold decorations have been in stores even longer. And by now, even the most stubborn of the November purists has given in. It's a Christmas takeover, and it seems like there's no room for Advent. In this cultural pushing out of Advent and takeover by Christmas, It seems we've lost Advent's wake-up call. Now, in some traditions, there's actually been a counter-push for expanding Advent to 7 weeks, including the 3 weeks before today, which is not a completely novel idea. It's actually a return to an earlier practice in the church. And after all, our texts for the past couple of weeks have sounded an awful lot like Advent, concerned with things like the reign of God and end times, all calling us to wake up and be ready. Advent is a little bit like Lent in that way, a time of preparation and reorientation ahead of one of the biggest celebrations on the church calendar. So what do we have to prepare for in this Advent season? Well, if we take our cue from Black Friday and consumer marketing, it's shopping for presents, baking, hosting parties, and decorating every last square inch of the house or church. But how easy it is to get bogged down and overwhelmed in all of that. What if instead we took advantage of this season to nourish our souls, to take time to pause, to sit still, to reflect, to pray, to sit in the darkness before the dawn, just a little while longer? Every time Advent's wake-up call rolls around, I think a lot about the concept of light and darkness. Traditionally, this is a season where we look forward to the coming of the dawn, to the coming of the light that dispels the darkness. A season where darkness has come to be viewed as bad and light good. But what if we could imagine darkness as a good thing? What if we could dwell in the darkness of this season and learn to walk in the dark? After all, some of our most significant Bible stories happen in darkness. God creates the world from a murky abyss. Jacob wrestles with God all throughout the nights. God leads the Israelites out of slavery under the cover of nights. An angel visits Joseph in a dream as he sleeps to tell him of Mary's pregnancy. It seems like the Bible is trying to tell us something about darkness. In darkness comes creation, liberation, promise. This is not the darkness of the tomb, but the darkness of the womb. Darkness that is growing new life and giving birth to great hope. God's people are invited to dwell in God's holy darkness that is always birthing something new. After all, Isaiah's words of prophetic hope and promise of the day of war no more come to a people very much in the midst of darkness and destruction and exile and trauma. Rushing too quickly to the light of dawn, we might just miss the promises waiting in the dark. Now, all of that said, I think there's probably more than just two types of people. I think there's actually a third type of person this time of year. And maybe it's a type that we can all in some way, shape, or form in these days identify with. It's the type of person who just isn't feeling the holiday spirits. Often it's because of the grief of a recent or not so recent loss of a loved one. There's one less stocking hanging from the mantle, one less place setting at the family dinner table. Others of us might look at the state of the world around us. War in Eastern Europe and Ukraine, hurricanes in Florida, Puerto Rico, and the Caribbean, mass shootings at a Walmart in Virginia and a nightclub in Colorado. I suspect a lot of us fall into this third category, whether or not we have our trees up on November 1st or not. It's why some churches have regularly begun to observe Blue Christmas, a special service often coinciding with the winter solstice, also known as the longest nights, that carves out space for those who aren't quite feeling holly or jolly. As I've experienced it, Blue Christmas is a time to sit intentionally in a quiet, prayerful, dimly lit space with all of the emotions that the season brings. It's also a time to remember that God is as much in the darkness as in the lights. And perhaps, if those stories of our biblical ancestors are any indication, God is felt even more acutely and more strongly in the darkness. Now, that's not the reason why Advent's liturgical color is blue, though that would make for a convenient transition. But like Blue Christmas, Blue Advent extends a similar invitation. As one writer puts it, Advent reminds us that God seeks us out where we are right now, not where we should be by our own or anyone else's estimation. God seeks us out when we are in exile and when we are suffering, when we are callous and cowardly, when we are more concerned with common sense than faithfulness, when we are fearful and arrogant, when we are lost and broken, when we are sad and alone, when we are traumatized, when we feel forgotten and bored and insignificant and tired, when we are wounded, and when we are the ones who are wounding. Advent indeed calls us to wake up. Advent's wake-up call, though, is less of an alarm clock and more of a meditation bell. Advent calls us to wake up to God's promises for us. It doesn't rush us toward Christmas or toward how we think we're supposed to feel this time of year. Advent invites us to linger in the darkness. Let your eyes adjust to the nights. Give it time. Don't rush through it. Even there, even now, God is with us still.